don't know. Tim Walz is out there talking again.
You say he could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their and they're scared of him because he could fix a truck. Like they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. That's what he said. I'm like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
You were saying that men he worked with in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI because they believed he had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government?
They suspect that he did.
Suspected to the point that they went to the FBI.
And then China started producing almost a carbon copy of this military tank a couple of years later.
Come on. For real?
According to all of our research.
Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson just gave Minnesota Governor Tim Walz a verbal beatdown for the ages. Rogan brought the fire with blunt disbelief and sharp humor, while Tucker carved up Walz's policies like a chef with a score to settle. From mishandling the pandemic to letting crime run wild, they painted Walz as the poster child for polite failure. If poor leadership needed a face, this takedown just gave it a name.
There's video of Tim Walz doing the exact same thing.
Right.
Exact same thing, and he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like,
it's coordinated propaganda.
So who is Tim Walz exactly? Most of us, I just want to say, I think he's should be investigated by the sex crimes unit. I really feel that way. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but he's one of the creepiest people I've ever seen. The vibe I get off that guy, I would not let him in my house. That's just my feeling. Maybe I'm being totally unfair.
Joe Rogan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing that familiar skeptical smirk, like someone had just claimed a tofu patty could outshine a ribeye. The subject? Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Rogan didn't bother with a warm-up. He dove in headfirst, unleashing a barrage of logic and raw disbelief. This wasn't a gentle critique, it was a full-throttle, no-filter takedown of government dysfunction, and Walz was the unfortunate bullseye.
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Wasn't she a joke even among Democrats?
First, Rogan took aim at Walz's pandemic playbook. With a chuckle and a shake of his head, he compared it to a bad sci-fi movie. According to Rogan, Walz treated Minnesota like a giant petri dish, crafting the most baffling, restrictive set of rules imaginable. Small businesses were shuttered, schools stayed closed, but big box stores kept cashing in. Rogan mocked the twisted logic of closing down local gyms while liquor stores stayed wide open, joking that Walz must have thought booze fought off the virus better than fresh air and exercise.
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this
in
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
And then came the mask mandates. Rogan rolled his eyes so hard, you'd think he was trying to forget a decade-old mystery meat lunch. He painted Tim Walz as a governor flipping through a pandemic playbook written by Twitter activists and out-of-touch bureaucrats who hadn't seen daylight since the early 2000s. This wasn't science-driven leadership, Rogan argued, it was pure panic theater, with Walz starring as the overdramatic lead and every Minnesotan stuck playing a confused extra.
Doesn't bother me that much. If the people in Minnesota like it, who cares? It's just a star and some colors. The real problem is when you hear discussions of things that are openly Marxist philosophies, when you hear talk about equal outcomes and not just equal opportunity, but that we all need to arrive at the same place, equal outcome talk. There's only one way they can do that, and it's by forcing you.
Well, it's by everyone having nothing.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have things totally equal. Because
Exactly.
you can't have everyone have everything. That's impossible.
Right. There's no way. There's not enough resources.
And then came the riots, and Rogan wasn't even mad at first, just stunned. The way Walz handled the George Floyd protests, and more critically, the violent chaos that followed, left him speechless, if only for a moment. Then he tore in like someone who'd just watched a firefighter dump gasoline on a raging fire. Rogan slammed the governor for letting Minneapolis spiral into what looked like a post-apocalyptic movie set, while Walz stood there wide-eyed, doing nothing but acting shocked as entire city blocks went up in flames.
I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it.
First of all, kudos to CBS for allowing Governor Walz to quote Matthew 25:40 without interrupting him and saying, I'm sorry, that's an attempt at bringing in foreign disinformation campaigns. We can't accept that.
May those words burn on your tongue.
Right.
That's what I thought.
Rogan didn't hold back. He joked that Tim Walz seemed determined to break a world record for the slowest reaction to civil unrest, like he was just waiting for the Flames to send him a calendar invite. To Rogan, Walz wasn't governing, he was holding press briefings and praying the smoke would clear on its own. It wasn't leadership, it was like watching a substitute teacher try to manage a riot with nothing but a pamphlet and blind hope. Then came education, and that's when Rogan really dug in. He scorched Walz's cozy relationship with the teachers' unions, calling it less of a partnership and more of a hostage crisis. Schools were shut down so long, Rogan quipped, kids nearly forgot what a pencil looked like. Meanwhile, union leaders were treated like high priests delivering divine commandments, every demand treated as sacred scripture. Public education in Minnesota, Rogan said, had become a political vending machine, insert buzzword, get no results. And then he went in on crime. Rogan tore into rising violent crime, carjackings, and plummeting police morale. Under Walz, he claimed, Minneapolis turned into a place where Uber drivers deserved combat bonuses and cops were treated like the criminals they were chasing. He painted a picture of Walz calmly sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Please don't blame me," while neighborhoods descended into chaos and people locked their doors before lunchtime.
If someone is going to inherit your soul, they don't want it bogged down with bad habits.
Right. Yeah, well, they don't want it to be evil. They
Right.
want it to have negative energy attached to it and the karma of killing a bunch of people. Like,
Right.
who wants Dick Cheney's soul? You know? The alien's like, you could have that dude.
Remember when he shot someone and then the guy apologized to
Yeah.
him? Isn't that nuts?
You know how gangster that is?
Yeah.
You shoot a guy in the face and the dude's like, yeah, I look like a bird. Don't worry about it.
I
Yeah.
look like a deer. Is there any way to you that we're not being gaslit like to hell by Kamala Harris?
In what way?
Then Rogan, like a stand-up comic with a grudge, took aim at Walz's public image. He said the guy looked like he was always on the brink of apologizing for something he didn't even understand. From his voice to his body language, there was no confidence, just the political version of a shrug wrapped in a suit and tie. Rogan quipped that Walz resembled a middle manager nervously giving a disaster prep PowerPoint, while the building was already burning down behind him. Enter Tucker Carlson. If Rogan brought the sarcasm, Tucker brought the scalpel. No yelling. No theatrics. Just that signature icy grin, the kind that quietly warns, I'm about to peel your reputation apart, piece by piece. And then Tucker got to work.
I think it's fake. All of it.
Well, that Walz guy, I mean, I don't want to be too unfair because I don't know him and I don't have any hard evidence. He's a weirdo. That guy's weird.
He seems very
I'm
strange,
sorry.
yes.
There's something
Yeah.
not right about that guy's personal life. So I hope I'm wrong because I don't want people like that with power. But most people I know with power in Washington have personal lives that would not withstand scrutiny.
Then Tucker turned to Walz's response to the George Floyd crisis, not to question his compassion, but to spotlight the vacuum of leadership. Tucker wasn't criticizing empathy, he was condemning absence. While Minnesotans were terrified, businesses burned, and citizens begged for guidance, Walz vanished behind vague platitudes and polished sorrow. It was, Tucker said, like watching a ship captain offer grief counseling while steering straight into an iceberg. When the topic shifted to law and order, Tucker didn't hold back. To him, this was the centerpiece of Walz's failure. Minnesota had become a playground for soft-on-crime experiments, and Walz was the head lab tech. Tucker painted a brutal picture, a governor who handed over public safety to ideological activists while ordinary families bore the cost. Crime wasn't just a chart, it was lives shattered, businesses ruined, and neighborhoods abandoned because leaders lacked the courage to name evil when it stood at their door. He tore through botched reforms, mocked the demonization of police, and blasted Walz for bowing to the loudest, most radical voices in his party. It wasn't leadership, it was, as Tucker put it, moral surrender with a press pass. Walz didn't protect his people. He protected his public image. And Tucker wasn't done. He dove into the economy, calling Minnesota's tax policies under Walz a blueprint for driving people out. He described the middle class loading up U-Hauls and heading for states with lower taxes and greater sanity. Meanwhile, Walz held rallies about economic justice like he was starring in a documentary called How to Fail Upward. Businesses fled, regulations choked innovation, infrastructure crumbled, all under the banner of a forward-thinking agenda that was anything but.